Every time you read a great book, it's easy to believe the author behind it is some unbelievable creative genius who operates on a completely different level compared to your average human being. But the truth is, behind every good book is a real person, a real human being. Someone with doubts, strange ideas, messy experiences, wild stories, and a life that shaped every page they wrote. So welcome to Authors by Us, the podcast where we go beyond the book. Here we sit down with authors not just to talk about what they wrote, although we will talk about that, but about the stories, experiences, opinions, and moments that shape them into who they are today. By the end of the conversation, we want you as the audience walking away feeling like the author you once admired from a distance can now be one of your closest friends that you could now grab a cup of coffee with. So if you love books, stories, or the people behind them, make sure to hit subscribe and let's meet today's author. I'm here today with Miss Lyons, the author of the Starlight Jewel series. How's it going today, Miss Lyon?
It's good. It's finally getting warmer over here. How are you?
Finally getting warm. Where are you coming to us from?
Virginia.
Southern Virginia?
Yeah, about as
Okay.
far south as you can go in Chase City.
Okay, so yeah, you've got quite the warm weather going on there. Well, I'm glad to have you on with us. I've been very excited to talk with you. I've learned quite a bit about you, and I'm very excited to get more of your insights on just your life in general. But to kick us off, I want to start with a question that, because as readers, we tend to have this thought process where we only look at authors as authors, what's on the page. But do you feel that the version of you that people admire, which would be the author side of things, actually reflects who you are as an individual?
Um, there are things that I'm sure come through in the writing about me. I think people could probably tell that I'm a bit scatterbrained when they read my books, just because there's so much going on, and it's clear that I did not keep the book as contained as I initially wanted it to be, or the series as contained as I wanted it to be. There's a lot of characters, a lot of side plots, a lot of magic systems. There's just a lot going on, and I think that if you know, that's a reflection of real life. And there's also probably a lot of sarcasm and sassiness in my book, and I think people would get that impression from me.
Hmm. You said scatterbrained, and then you said that also reflects real life. Can you go a little bit deeper on that? How do you find yourself being very scatterbrained? Does it just come down to ADHD, or is there other aspects in your life that you notice that lead to just your brain being everywhere at once?
You know, it's always I did get diagnosed with ADHD when I was in high school, but you never know what's a symptom and what's just you. And I do get overwhelmed by the amount of tasks that I give myself. Um,
Mm,
like I have so much that I want to do. I don't relate to boredom at all. Like there's just always something that I would love to be doing, but I also want to be doing this other thing, and so I have to pick and choose between everything, whether it's going outside and chopping down trees, or, like pruning the fruit trees. Like right now, I'm trying to get cuttings from the fruit trees and grow scions so that when we move, I can have those. Or being inside and writing or recording the audiobook or editing the audiobook or marketing. I have tried this last year to get a little bit better at the marketing and making content on TikTok and whatnot, but it definitely is hard to choose between all the things that I want to do and then
mm,
also continue learning. I guess I care about my brain. And once you're out of college, a lot of people just stop reading academic things, and they get stuck in news cycles and social media and things like that. But I really love academic stuff. Like I went to college because I loved the academic stuff, and I found college kind
mm.
of disappointing. I wish I just hadn't spent money on it. But as far as like why I went, I wanted to learn things. And so I've found I can do that very well on my own. I just need to take time from the fun stuff, like going out and collecting garbage in the woods, which I know is not probably fun to most people, but like everything's fun in a different way. There's different fulfillment that you can get from different things. So I wish I could live like 3 times as long or have 5 of me to do all the things that I want to do.
Interesting. You got pruning, so in some way, shape, or form, gardening. You've got going outside. You've got writing. You've got learning, academics. There is so much to unpack in all of that. Would you say that this has been instilled in you just from a young age, then, of being someone who wants to just do everything and be everything and go everywhere?
Um, I kind of had one of those feral childhoods where like you weren't allowed in the house until dinner
Mm,
time.
mm,
We had one of those bells on the back porch. And I guess I did always want to know things. I kept a little journal and I would document the animals. You know, I would like draw the footprints in my little field notebook. And it's not like anybody was telling me to do that. Like, I also collected cigarette butts when my dad started smoking because I knew he wasn't supposed to be. He would go out at night, and so I was always investigating something and collecting the evidence in my little notebooks, and that went over very well all the time with everyone. Um, but yeah, I always just was very interested in everything. I guess like some people just like they have a question, they don't know something, and then they just move on with their life. But I end up thinking about it forever. Like it actually becomes like just bothersome to me if I just can't figure something out. Like I have to eventually look it up, even if I try to
mm.
ignore it. It's gonna come back to haunt me while I'm trying to sleep at 3 a.m. So I guess wanting to know things would be like my main motivation. But also, once I get to know something, then I really enjoy it. So, like trees, um,
Mm.
like I loved learning about trees, and after a while of learning about trees, I ended up just really loving trees. I always liked gardening, kind of. I'm not a good gardener as far as like letting things grow. Like I will kill any indoor house plant like very quickly. I just forget that they're there and like they die. But as far as like forestry maintenance goes, I love that. Like clearing out dead wood and doing controlled burns and making sure like the trees that I would like to select for have the space that they need and making access trails so that I can do forestry maintenance in different parts of the woods. And of course, since we caught a power line on fire last year, making sure that power line trees are clear. There's just so much to do and think about with like maintaining like woods that like are not necessarily mine because I'm in this weird transient living situation, but uh, it's just a big project that is never ending but super exciting because there's always like something to do to finish. But yeah, I guess that would be like growing up, I was just in the woods all the time. And I had a lot of questions while I was in the woods all the time. So I ended up liking trees a lot. You can definitely see that from my book. It's about tree people.
Well, gotta end the pocket. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, but both sides of the spectrum here. I wanna ask you about this because on the one hand, you say that I'm extremely scatterbrained, and when I think about that, I think of someone who is just all over the place. One day they're thinking about trees and learning everything about there in your case, and then the next day they're thinking about drawing, and then the next day they're thinking about this and they're thinking about this. But then on the other side of it, you also have this almost need to become I don't want to say extremely good at something, but to really really learn something and become almost passionate enough about it to where you want to pursue it to a higher degree of understanding. So how do you find the balance there within within yourself, because you've got this scatterbrain who wants to do everything, but then on the other side, this almost hyper focus brain who wants to really understand and learn something to a higher degree?
I would say I don't balance it very well. Uh, I definitely will start some projects and not finish them. Like there are things I know that I will always come back to, like, and then there are things that I would love to do, but they just I can't make the time for them even as much as I try. Especially like craft related stuff. Like I envy the crafters so much because they will work on the same type of project over and over and over again and get really like masterful at that. And I like a project that never ends, you know?
Mm,
I like to just be in the project forever. And so it's hard to balance that when you want to add in something new, but then it all ends up being related in the end anyway, like the writing and the learning and the trees, the forest maintenance, like all of it ends up being related. And I think that's kind of what makes the writing part so fun is because you can use all of it and you can weave it all together into the story and it shows you how things are connected in those ways so that you can create a new world that's connected in different ways, but that still makes the same kind of logical sense that the real world does.
mm.
Um, so I guess balancing, I don't know. I I'm always behind on laundry. I've always got dishes to do. Like I get them done eventually, but it's usually on like that last day where it's like so stressful that like I can't take it anymore. So I try to just do everything really fast in one day so I can get back to doing the things I want to do.
It's funny. I was just thinking back to what you said before about how you are always in trees, and then ironically, your book, which we'll talk about in a bit here, but your book sort of almost followed that because it's about tree people. I had a podcast recently with an author named S.J. Taylor. She, one of the points she told me that stood out the most was this idea of every author to some degree has their books mimicked based off of their life. Maybe it's not exactly because obviously in your book where it's all fantasy, obviously we can't say exactly that your book is like your life. But do you agree with that sentiment that to a degree, even if it's the smallest one, that most authors mimic their book or series off of their life?
I think that your life ends up going in there in some form or another, whether you realize it or not. But sometimes it's not like the main character or things like that, and sometimes you don't notice until after. Like after I finished writing my book, I realized that I made the entire like species of Spriggans like they can't go on boats or they'll die,
Mm,
and they can't like be in the air too long without they need a connection to the ground. And like I hate boats. I hate boats with a passion. I will not get on a boat.
mm,
Or and I hate planes too. Like I'll still get on a plane, but I don't want to be there. I like being on the ground. Uh, and so I kind of made like a self-insert species that hates loud noises and hates boats and just has these weaknesses that are kind of like my weaknesses. And then, you take bits and pieces from like people in your life, even if it's not like you're inserting them as a character, they are the person who taught you what that trait means. So, like when you're writing a
mm,
villain, there's always somebody who taught you, oh, people can be motivated in that way. Like
mm,
people can, have that kind of life and turn into that kind of person. And I was a psychology major in college, and I come from a family who's very mentally ill. So I had lots of like a a nice array of personalities to choose from as far as like examples of what can make people the way that they are and what motivates people and things like that. And so no one in the book is like based off of like a person entirely, but like there's a few characters like Grimm's mother in the book. Like I know a woman who is like the stereotypical good mother. Like she's just like what you think of when you think of a good mom. And I wanted that character in the book, and it was easy to write her because I've met somebody like that before. And so even though
Mm,
they don't actually have anything in common really, like that personality type was there as a framework for me to work with. So
mm,
yeah, I guess your life, and as far as like being outside in the trees goes, for sure that made it into the book. Like I was largely motivated by stories I was told as a kid, and my dad was always trying to scare me about the woods. So he told me lots of scary forest stories while we were in the woods, and that was always really exciting for me. It was like you were going in the woods and it's dangerous. And it was actually dangerous. Our property was infested with copperheads, and had a few snapping turtles. But
mm,
but like, it felt magical but also I guess terrifying. And I liked that combination of majestic and like also this could really be dangerous, like, and you have the fear with the awe. And the origin of the word awe also has to do with fear. Like those are like really related feelings even if we don't connect them so much nowadays. But and that largely drove the book, was where those things meet and how I feel when I'm in the woods, especially at night. Whenever I get writer's block, I go and just stand at the edge of the woods at night with like no light, and I listen to all the noises and try to figure out what I'm hearing. And inevitably, even though I know every single wild animal that lives in my area and every single bug noise and every single varmint and how the foxes sound,
mm.
I still my imagination goes to other places and
Mm.
thinks of the terrifying things that could be. So I like that aspect of my childhood going into the book and being a large inspiration for the book.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah.
You talked about this idea of fear and awe. Do you think of yourself as a thrill seeker? Because I know for a lot of them, that's the same feeling they get. I mean, for example, you'll see those videos of people who will be going skydiving and they're just not even nervous to drop. They get to the top where they're about to drop and they're just immediately off the helicopter or off the plane and just going and doing flips and going absolutely ham. And then you see other videos of people doing other crazy stuff like that and it just seems so easy for them. And so when you speak of you going into the woods, even though you're as a child, even though your dad was telling you these horrifying stories that would make most people almost, I don't want to say have trauma, but have trauma towards the woods, and you saw it as almost an exciting thing. Do you think of yourself as a little bit of a thrill seeker?
Yes. I'm a thrill seeker in different ways than other people are. I will not
Yeah.
jump out of a plane. I I I have no confidence in my ability to not pass out before I get to the ground.
Mm,
Like I just feel like I'd be up there and I'd be like, "Oh, this was a bad idea." And then I'm out and then I don't pull the chute and then I'm dead. I'm not gonna jump out of a plane ever in my life.
mm,
But like I've rock climbed before and I love that. You've got ropes. After you pass out, you're gonna be fine. You're just gonna
mm,
fall off and, maybe take somebody else with you. Like I wouldn't do the crazy rock climbing you see in these like TikTok videos that people do, like where they're, really, really high up. Just regular
mm,
rock climbing in Virginia is fine for me. I like our little rocks. And just that feeling of accomplishment when you get over fear, I think is like really nice. Like I am afraid of heights in a sense. I have all those impulsive thoughts. Like every time I look at the edge of a cliff, I think about, oh, I'm probably just going to jump off this. I have no desire to jump off it, but you get those intrusive thoughts that are like, drive off the bridge.
mm,
And that makes it frightening, even though I don't think it would be for me otherwise. So when you get over that and you just like accomplish, your little rock climbing thing, then that's a good feeling. Um, and it is a bit exhilarating, but and I suppose I have always liked to do reckless things for a purpose.
Mm,
Um, and I've tried to get a little bit better about my choices on which reckless things I do. Like as a teenager, I would just stop for any person asking for a ride on the side of the road and drive them wherever they wanted to go.
mm.
Um, and that was probably not an intelligent thing to do, but I figured what was the worst that could happen? And you know, and like catching wild animals when they're hurt and things like that. I still do that on occasion. Um, but it's just a matter of trying to balance like how dangerous you want to live your life, how much you like it, and but also having a bit of fun. I like to have a bit of fun,
Mm.
and I think varmints are very fun. I would much rather catch a like injured raccoon than I would like to jump out of a plane. Like I I feel
Two
like one is
extremes.
like a good thrill and one is like a why would I ever want to do that thrill? So
Makes sense. I'm kind of in the same boat, so I get that. But you talked about your dad, and I actually want to move towards that direction because from what I've learned, he was the reason why you fell in love with fantasy in the first place as a child. And based on the article that I read from you, it seems like he was truly the reason why you are where you are today. How much, but maybe I can't explain it fully, but how much of an effect did he have on you just growing up and m- allowing you to almost make it to where you are now based on what he has done for you?
um I I would say it's complicated.
Mm,
For sure, he is the reason that I love sci-fi and fantasy. Without a doubt. Probably the reason that I write. Yeah, he loved sci-fi and fantasy. We always had Dune and Lord of the Rings on the shelf and he read me Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis, I, Robot as bedtime stories. For a while, he actually read me radiography books as bedtime stories um,
mm,
when he was in school. But uh, but yeah, he definitely instilled that love for sci-fi and fantasy in me, like from before I was born. He was reading to me while I was in the womb.
mm,
Uh, and he was a big nerd, like Star Trek nerd. Like we would sit and drink Earl Grey tea while watching Star Trek. And the Star Wars movies came out, the newer ones, and he was so excited, and we got all the cups and everything. It just we had like a nerd culture in our family because of him. My mother hasn't read a book since college. She DNF'd my book when she realized there was matricide in it. And, which totally fair, has nothing to do with her, but she's still offended a little bit, not really, but she's just not a big reader, and she's not a nerdy person. I kind of got an even bit of both of their personalities. She loves to chainsaw trees, just like me. That's like some kind of genetic defect we have. Um, and we both love shelves. I can never have enough shelves. If like there's not enough shelves, I have anxiety. Um, but yeah, he was a huge nerd, and I guess also just like really big into nature. I was talking about like personality archetypes that kind of help you to see like what a person can be.
mhm,
And like I don't think I would ever write a character like my dad because he was so different. But he was very kind and very very irresponsible. So when you say like what I like, can I attribute being where I am today to him? Um, Kind of, but kind of no. Like, my mother was the responsible one. She was always there. There was like 3 years where he was homeless and in prison. Um,
Mm,
and, he's the nicest person, or he was the nicest person you would ever meet. But he was a drug addict and alcoholic. So it's like he had so much to offer me as far as like creativity and kindness goes, and then
mm,
just could not get himself together as much as he tried. And it wasn't his fault. He clearly had a disease, and you know, when I look at his childhood, it's shocking he came out nice. Like, you kind of you don't think about it when you're a kid that your parents were also kids at some point in their life. But then you get
mm-hmm,
older and you think about, my goodness, he went through all that and he still came out a kind person. So he definitely was a huge influence. But as far as like, would I be responsible enough to publish a book and edit a book and go to college and do things like that without my mother? I probably wouldn't have even graduated high school. Um,
mm.
so I think they were equal contributors into me being who I am,
Okay.
both genetically and as far as like, you know, accomplishing things goes.
Mhm.
But she was definitely the rock and he was the river. So,
And then, so by the way, really quickly, I will mention that I'm sorry for your loss. I know you lost your dad, and I can't even imagine what that was like. But when you look at Starlight Jewel as a book, do you see, does this story almost feel like it was almost, I don't want to say attributed to your dad, but do you see yourself as having accomplished something that maybe at some point in his life he may have been able to if it wasn't for other
for sure.
circumstances?
Yeah, he loved to write. He actually wrote a bunch of poems and like a couple like half of short stories. Like he would start something. So he also had dysgraphia, just like I do. And typing wasn't really as much of a thing in his time. Like I know that there were typewriters, but you had to actually have the money to get a typewriter. And you know, it's also the cost and maintenance of typewriters and everything. And he was just a redneck living in the middle of the woods, so it
Mm,
was just not feasible for him to go that route. And I guess he didn't have the support system that I had as well. Like when I talk about my mother being the rock, she really like she kept me up until 3 a.m. some mornings practicing my handwriting just to make
mm,
sure that it was legible. And when I say some, I mean a lot. Did I like it? No. But she made sure that I was going to pass school and like not fall behind. He didn't have any of that. He came from, again, a very mentally ill family of drug addicts and alcoholics. And so, there was just never any chance for him to be as creative as he wanted to be or he could have been. And he didn't have the confidence. He had the dysgraphia and he was never diagnosed. Like this is me diagnosing him after his death, like,
mm.
or but I've seen so much of his handwriting because he wrote so much that it's pretty obvious. um but he definitely, I feel like, would have been a fantastic author if he had been given the tools and resources to do that. And I guess like also just the life. Like he just was not, he didn't have the opportunities that I had. Like I have the opportunity to sit and type on a laptop, which
Mhm.
is crazy. I mean, like 2026. I didn't get a laptop until I was 17. And I had before that I had one of those, when you get diagnosed they give you like a giant calculator that you can type on, which they sell now to writers as like distraction free writing, which I think is hilarious. It's like Alpha something, I forget what they're called, that they've got like the calculator screen that's like dark. Anyway,
Mm,
but I'm so grateful that I live in this time period where I can have a computer and I can type so that when I do make mistakes, inevitably, like every sentence, I can erase them and people don't look at my handwriting and think, oh, that looks like a 5-year-old wrote it. So it definitely feels like I accomplished something that he should have been able to if he had lived in a different time. and it
Mm,
would have been awesome if he could have. And my maternal great grandmother, who's where I got my pen name from, was also a writer, and she wrote books on a typewriter. Um,
mm,
and she actually went to like snail mail college. She sent her stories, and they were more like, I think, novella sized things. She would send them in, and then professors would mail them back to her with corrections on. She lived in like the middle of nowhere, Kentucky and West Virginia. So
mm.
again, she was never able to be a famous writer, but like she also had like 5 kids and was a redneck in the middle of the woods.
Mm. For the audience, because from what I've learned, it's a fairly rare disease, fairly rare condition. What is dysgraphia, just so they understand what you and your dad were going through?
It's like a writing disorder. Um, and there are several different like aspects or types to it. So some people have dysgraphia and it's more like dyslexia where it only comes out with like their spellings and like letter formation, like writing letters backwards and sometimes writing words backwards, getting the letters mixed up, just not being able to keep track of letter formation and spelling on the page. And I don't have much of that. I have more of the spatial issues. So, and that's the most common type of dysgraphia is having spatial issues. So, for whatever reason, in the communication between my hand, my brain, and my eyes and the paper, something has gone wrong. And I
Mm,
can't figure out, how big to make the letter, or when you try to make it a certain size, it just doesn't happen. And then when you try to make it a certain shape, it doesn't happen. Like what it's supposed to look like, and it doesn't ever look like that. Um, and then you lose track of the spacing more and more as you progress. Like if I write on unlined paper, it just turns into a big blob of markings that don't look like letters anymore.
mm,
Uh, some people have fine motor coordination dysgraphia. That's the most common type of acquired dysgraphia. And I actually have acquired more dysgraphia because I got like nerve damage. But
mm,
but that's like if you have a stroke. So like my granddad had a stroke, and so he acquired dysgraphia, and it was hard for him to write. And that's kind of different than these other two, which are like the kind you see in children. Um, and that gets diagnosed sort of earlier.
mm,
But it makes it. You would think it's just bad handwriting, but that ends up not being like since you're so focused on trying to make the letters look like letters. You end up misspelling things. You can't think. There's just too much going on when you're trying to focus on one thing, and so you
mm,
lose track of what you're trying to say. So uh, it's more complicated than that, but
mm.
basically that's it.
When I read the article that you wrote in there something that touched me quite a bit. You talked about how most people have a dream to do something. For you, writing wasn't a dream. It felt like a need, a desire. It felt like something that if you didn't do, you basically had no sense of self at all because you just needed to be writing. Yet you found out about a disorder that was causing you to have the hardest time with writing. What caused you to be able to just have this need to write? Because most people, if they found out, for example, I'm just thinking for myself here, if I found out that I had a disorder that made it nearly impossible for me to write. Now, obviously, in today's age, we have computers, laptops, etc. But if I were put in a position where I knew that I couldn't really write at all, it would feel like something that I would no longer want to pursue, let alone have a need for. Yet you went the opposite way. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what really caused this need for you to write, even though you were dealing with something that if anyone else looked at you, they would say, I understand if you don't want to write.
So that's complicated. I don't feel like I can help writing, which has been a problem in the past. because before I got diagnosed, I still dealt with a lot of physical pain from writing. So
Mm.
like the concentration and trying to hold the pen right, like it ends up seizing up my like wrist and arm muscles pretty badly, and it's very painful. So like even as early as middle school, I was having to use Tiger Balm on my arm, and like my parents took me to doctors because they thought I might have carpal tunnel. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. This was before my dysgraphia diagnosis, which was not until high school. And the reason why I kept running into this pain was not because of my schoolwork. It was because of the writing.
Mm.
Like it was just because I wanted to write like stupid stories, and it's not like I had any desire to be an author or to publish books. Like I just had stories that I desperately wanted to write, and I did not have the willpower to not write the stories. And that continues to this day. Like there is often times where I know a responsible person would be doing other things, and instead I'm writing. um, and it's been problematic. It was problematic in college when I was wanting to do schoolwork, and like I said, I kind of have like this. I don't balance well with all the things that I want to do. It's like I wanted to go to college and do schoolwork, but much more than that, I wanted to write stories, um, which did not result in the best grades for like the first 2 years I was there. I did eventually get it like under control enough for like the last 2 years to get my GPA up, which thank goodness. But but yeah, when I got the diagnosis, it was like kind of late in school compared to like all the kids who got diagnosed with other things. And like I've gone back and talked to my other teachers that I had before then, because it's a small town, so it's small schools. They all still remember you, um, and they all knew. They all knew, and they didn't recommend me to get tested because I had like good enough grades. And like I felt really resentful at first because everyone knew something was wrong with me, you know, and everyone knew I was struggling, and I guess people did not realize how much I was struggling, and it was it was just like this could have been so much easier. Like if I had just known, it would have been so much easier on my confidence. Like there was one teacher, like when I first got to like middle school, Mr. Cloud or Mr. McCloud or something like that. And he saw my handwriting and he like laughed at me in front of the class. And he said like,
Mm.
I thought seeing like a cute girl like you with your ponytail, you would have beautiful handwriting. And like he's saying that like in front of the whole class, and I'm like, well, thanks. And like he knew my brother, and he started talking about how my brother's handwriting was so beautiful. I was
Mm.
already jealous of my brother because everything was so nice for him, and so it was uh, it was it was frustrating. And then after I got over the frustration, I got really spiteful. And I will never claim to be like a just like purely nice person. I am
Mhm.
motivated intensely by spite, and so then I thought about you know, all these people who had just like let me struggle for no apparent reason other than like she's doing all right, you know.
Mhm.
I decided to work to make my handwriting better based on what I learned about dysgraphia, um, which made my wrist problems even worse. But I did manage to get myself to a point of writing legibly. Like I learned that graph paper is extremely helpful because it gives you an extra spatial parameter to work with. Super helpful if I had known that before. I didn't know I had spatial problems, which would explain why I was so bad at sports. Um, but yeah, so then after that, I went to college and I was still working on like my new form of handwriting that just involved less, like there was less areas for you to mess up in a spatial way, like with the curves on letters and stuff. So I just kind of made a legible form of handwriting for myself. But the whole time I was still just like writing handwriting stories, and then I got the laptop when I went to college, and that allowed me to type, which allowed me to recover from my wrist pain. Like I was in a wrist brace for most of high school because of writing fiction stories. And then I got to college and it allowed me to kind of like give my wrist a break by just typing, which is much easier on my hands. And that allowed me to waste even more time. Um, as somebody who's still like I didn't think that I wanted to publish a book until I got to Starlight Jewel. It was literally just writing because I did not have the willpower not to write. And it does it's probably not the best habit to not be able to break out of for somebody with dysgraphia. But also just generally, I will go weeks without texting my family and friends and just not even notice because I'm just in a book.
It's funny you call it not the best habit. For me, I think it's something extremely empowering because after looking at your story and how you went through so much pain between mental pain because of just feeling like everyone was way ahead of you because of your writing not being up to snuff, as they would say, compared to everyone else, and then on top of that having to literally deal with physical pain on top of that, yet still again having this need to write stories. It's something that I think everyone can truly learn from, because even though it wasn't like you had this dream to become an author, like you said, the fact that you had a need to still write stories, which I want to go a little deeper on that in a sec, but the fact that you had this need to write stories and you weren't going to allow something that theoretically should be stopping you from doing it to not stop you. And in fact, you went as far as to, like you said, almost have spite to prove to everyone, hey, I have this problem, but I'm still going to pursue something that I have a need for. I personally find that very empowering. But to go a little bit deeper, why why did writing to you feel almost like an instinct, like a natural thing? Because for a lot of people, and for a lot of authors that I interview, they tend to have this same reasoning where at some point in their life, writing went from being just a hobby to almost just, I instinctively had to start writing. Where do you think that feeling truly comes from? I know you talked about spite, but do you feel as though it was just embedded in you from a young age, or was there a turning point in your life where writing no longer was just a hobby, but then it became something where it was just every day it's my instinct to just start writing stories?
I mean, I loved stories like for as long as I can remember. I was like reading or listening to stories, then reading stories, but also telling stories. Like I don't know where that comes from. Like when we would just be driving in the car, like when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I would see like an abandoned shack on the side of the road, and I would start telling my mother a story about like the fairies and the alligators living. It was always fairies and alligators at that age. I'm not really sure why, um, but they were living in this abandoned shack, and then so as soon as I started like learning to write, I started writing things. Like in the fourth grade, I had like started this comic strip, like Queen Mab and the Sticks or something. And it was just like stick figures. I was terrible at drawing and like little bubble words that nobody could read. And I also love comics. Like I don't read them anymore so much, but growing up, like I was raised on like the '80s comics. Um, and so like I started with the comic strips and poetry and that as soon as I could write well enough to write a page of writing, I was writing like the beginnings of novels. I was never very good at short stories. Um, it was always just like I had a world in my mind and I wanted to write that world. But then, I was always disappointed in it. Um, I guess I do struggle with a little bit of perfectionism. and I hated everything that I wrote. Just everything that I wrote sucked. And looking back, it did. Like I can confidently say now, it was all bad. Um, but that's how it should be. And I guess it didn't occur to me until I was getting ready to publish Starlight Jewel that like it's not about just like having some natural talent. Like people don't just like spit out a book and it's good. There's not like people who are writers and not writers. Like I guess I had it in my mind that I was not a talented enough person to be an author. Obviously, I have dysgraphia and my books suck. So like why would I even think about being an author? And so like when I did finally like start warming up to the idea of publishing because somebody else suggested it, it was kind of like I was thinking like am I good enough to publish? Like
Mm.
am I like even like is it worth publishing for someone like me? And then I read a couple books that really gave me confidence to publish because they were so bad. One of them was Queen of the Tierling. I don't mind trash talking that, but that's a terrible book. And I read it, and uh, you know, there's so many plot holes. There's so many plot holes, and like nothing makes sense. And this main character just talks about how attractive every person she sees is. And I'm like, literally every person you encounter does not have to have like a 1 to 10 rating. Um, like, and I was reading this and I was like, my my book doesn't do these things. Maybe it has plenty of its own problems that are going to definitely bother people, but it's not going to have these problems that bother me because I wouldn't write that. You
Mm.
know, and it's subjective. There's tons of books that like I read that I hate and then like other people don't even notice the things that I notice. And then
Mm.
there's books that I love and people read them and they don't connect at all. And so it started occurring to me that like maybe being an author was not some like, in the clouds like crazy mystical profession that like only certain people are talented enough to do and that maybe you just have to get really good at editing. and and so I edited it for like 2 years, and then like at some point during the editing was kind of when I decided to publish. Like Starlight Jewel was not meant to be published in the first draft, like, but I had a small mental meltdown after I reread the first draft after writing it, and somebody told me that I needed to like get a grip and like either go join a writing group or take some classes or something if I was going to get this
Mm.
emotional about it. Which was very
Mm.
good advice. And so I did. I joined like the next big writer, which is like just a website where you exchange critiques with people. And there was this guy on there, Mark, and he read like the first two chapters of my book and then said that he was probably not going to continue. And I desperately wanted him to continue. I had a bunch of people read those first couple chapters that I posted because you post chapter by chapter, and none of their feedback was helpful. Like you get people who will just tell you it's great, and I don't believe anybody when they say it's great. Like I'm
Mm.
never gonna be the person who believes somebody when they give me a compliment for one, but also I knew it was bad, uh, and I had no idea why it was bad. I just needed a mechanic, and uh, and so when he said he probably wasn't going to continue, I like that night just manic like just started editing the crap out of taking all the suggestions he said and doing the most. Like I just did as much as I possibly could with the advice that he gave. And I came
Mm.
back and I said that to him and he was like, "All right, never mind. I'll keep going." And so uh and I didn't understand very much then, but I do now that I've beta read for so many other people. Um but you get to beta reading and people just don't take good advice, like you're trying to explain to them the very basics of the craft, like don't info dump in the beginning, and they're like,
Mm.
well, everybody needs to know this info, and they're
Mm.
insistent that their book is different, they can do the info dump. and nobody's going to mind when they do it. And it gets frustrating when you're at that point when you see all these problems and you're like, I'm just trying to help you get this to like a baseline level, like standard for publishing. And they won't even cooperate with that. They don't actually want your help on that. And so, like, me, I guess, taking all that advice and like using it was encouraging to him. And he was like, yeah, I'll keep doing it. So now he's read it like a lot. He's probably read my first book more times than me in trying to help
Mm,
me edit it. And so he
mm,
taught me so much. Like, he's just the most intelligent person I've ever met. He, like, it about so many subjects, and he knows about so many different eras of writing, and just his grammar knowledge is off the charts. So I love learning from him and getting to pick his brain on different things. And I still am learning from him. Like I had a question about, I don't know if you saw, I was translating that 1716 will, or deciphering, not really translating, but the end is translating because it's in Latin. And so I had to email him, and he like immediately had answers about like, this topic that we've never talked about before, and it's only vaguely related to like the kind of English you do when you're writing. But he was like, yeah, I think that's like a thorn. And I was like, well, cool, like immediately without having to do any research. But yeah, so learning from him was the biggest opportunity I got. And he was the one who suggested that I publish the book. And I didn't know self-publishing existed before then. Like, I think I might have even read Anthony Ryan's books when they were self-published. I just didn't know. Just somebody handed me Anthony Ryan's books and I read them. Um, and that's usually how I got books. So I knew nothing about publishing at all.
mm,
Um, and so then I had to consider like, am I gonna trad pub or self pub? And I looked at the standards for trad pub as far as like word length goes, and I tried to like cut enough to get to that, but like 70,000 words into a cut, I was just like, I can't cut anymore. I've got no that's left to sacrifice to trad, and so it was too long, and I also felt like there's just nothing to comp this with, and they're probably gonna want me to add spice. And like, what if they want me to have a romance like cover? And at this point, I didn't know romantasy was a thing. I thought it was just romance and fantasy. And I thought since my book has romance in it, they might want to put like some like shirtless guy on the front of the cover or something. And I didn't want that because that's the romance that I'm aware of from like now I realize like the 90s. Um, like the last romance books that I've seen were like the ones on like my friend's grandmother's shelf, which had
mm.
fantastic covers for romance. But yeah, so being out of touch does not help when you're publishing a book. If anyone was wondering, you should probably get on social media before you publish and kind of get a feel for the environment. I did not do that. So I was a little bit behind. But yeah, so then I just started thinking about publishing as like a realistic thing that I could actually do and that people might actually like my book. But then when I published, I did publish with the full expectation that it would just get torn to pieces and people would one star it. Um, and I'm still kind of shocked that people have liked it. you know, it's you live in this world in your head. Like it's been like 7 years of Gifts of the Old Tree now in my head, and people actually like being in that world, and that's cool. And sometimes I'm just like wandering like discords and people are just like talking about my world in like a discord like without me.
Mm,
Like people like my world exists to people when I'm not even there, and
mm.
like they're just having fun making like tree jokes about my book. So, I don't know, that's it's been like a series of really cool feelings that I never thought I would experience. Like I would have never let myself have such a ridiculous dream. Like I've always been kind of a realistic person, so having a dream that is so unrealistic for me personally, just as like a dysgraphic redneck who is just not very business minded and like didn't have any natural talent for writing, to see that I could publish for one, but also that people actually like the thing that I published is just, it's still unbelievable to me.
Well, we're glad you published this book because we your story is incredible. It's incredible because against all odds, you are literally the definition of against all odds in the writing community because again, we talk about what you went through, your disorder, and then you bring that all the way to the point where you somehow, through it all, published a story that now, like you said, you've been surprised, you've been shocked to see. And that's why, on the one hand, no one would blame you that you would have this realistic outlook on your book and everything because there'd be that part of you that would go, there's no way with everything I've been through and what I still go through that I would create anything worth talking about. So your story is a very, very amazing one. But since we're on the topic of your book, Starlight Jewel, and then obviously the sequel, I forget the name of it, but what are we getting with these stories? Because I think many people, after hearing your story, they're going to be very interested to see what do we truly get when I pick or when we pick up Starlight Jewel.
World building, for one. I did a lot of world building. And I think I did it in a sort of different way than like most people or most authors do. I think there are some benefits to me having lived under a rock before publishing. It's just that I didn't have any influence from anyone aside from like reading books. So when I was trying to come up with my process of how to do things, it was just kind of anything goes. So I looked into a lot of like science with like tree funguses and the mycorrhizal networks and bird brains and things like that to make the most realistic fantasy world I could. Um, because I love for things to make sense and be consistent throughout. And so there are multiple different types of magic systems. There's the Spriggan magic system, and then there's the loosely related glass magic system, and then there is the like overarching like star magic system. I know Starlight Jewel sounds like a stripper name, which I did not think about at the time of naming that book. But but the origin story from the world is actually like a meteor hits the planet, and there's like kind of like a parasitic alien. You'll it's fantasy. I know this sounds like sci-fi, but if you write everything in a specific way, then it turns out to be fantasy. So like they obviously call the meteors stars. And there's falling stars and yeah. So there's like a big magic system, which is like the stars, and then under that umbrella, there are several smaller magic systems, including the Spriggans, because these parasitic alien things take the DNA from like various species and kind of combine them. And it's very grounded magic. There's no like fireballs or anything like that. There is a like fire. Uh, I don't want to spoil anything for like the short story. There's a short story that has a beast that has fire related stuff, but it's realistic. It's not like crazy. But all the stuff is kind of like based in the real world, the magic. And like even reading the opening paragraph of the book, you can probably see that like it just opens with the magic. I tried to keep it kind of simple as far as like the terms and names for stuff goes because I knew I wanted a big world with a lot of things involved, and I didn't want to overwhelm readers by like naming the powers something like really like not English. So it's like keen ears and keen scent and quick step and soft step for like the Spriggan magic. And there's words that like you never know what words people actually are going to know and which ones they're not. So like I thought people would know Epheser. They don't know Epheser. They think I made that one up. Um, but Epheser or effacement is like a real thing. Like and then there's impartation as a gift, which, even though that's not like self-explanatory like by itself, once it happens in the book, that name makes it easier to remember. And I didn't give anybody really complicated names. Like the main character is like Axley, and her brother is sometimes Greg and sometimes Jackie. They're moving around and having to hide and things, so sometimes
Mhm.
his name is different. But the only characters that have like kind of like fantasy names, I picked two of them, Frialov and Cyrilov. And that was just intentional because I wanted to show like foreign etymology in like the home country that they're in, and how that relates to the city. So the city is named Menelov, and then like you can see that there's like a slight like spelling difference. It's like an apostrophe in the names of these two people, which kind of differentiates the origins to show that like this woman is an Ashite. So even though she's living in Norge, she is not like a part of this culture. She is from somewhere else, and but this place was originally did belong to the Ashites. So I was just trying to make those connections and weave that in with those names. But other than that, the names are pretty like easy to remember. I didn't come up with crazy fantasy names for anything. So it is big world building, but if you read epic fantasy regularly, then it should be like not overwhelming. It's not like Malazan. And I would say that it's really dark, but if you don't think about it, it doesn't have to be. Like, I know that there's a lot of popular books now that are just like in your face dark, and there's violence happening all the time, and it's very dark. But I have kind of more of like a subtle feminine dark writing style. Like, if you think about the things that are said in the book, it is an incredibly dark world that really sucks. But if you just gloss past everything that happens, then it can be fun, sort of, you know? And this, there's not like, there is a romance in it, but it's not like a melodramatic romantasy romance. I actually thought when I discovered romantasy that my book might be romantasy, so I went and I tried to read like a Sarah J. Maas book, and I think that is a completely different genre altogether. Um,
Mhm.
so after talking to some romantasy people, they confirmed it is definitely not romantasy. The romance is just kind of regular. There's just regular romance in there,
Yeah.
that you see in other epic fantasy as well. So
Man, I gotta get this book now. I swear I say that every single episode. I say that every single episode because every time you guys always intrigue me. I think the one thing I'm really fascinated by that I want to bring up here, you mentioned literally a couple minutes ago about how you built the whole ideology of this book around this idea of animal neurology and all of these other things. Most epic fantasies that focus on world building normally, maybe I'm wrong, but at least from the ones that I've seen mostly, it's all about mythology and gods, and that's the way that they build their world. How'd you even get to the point where you were thinking about it from this whole new perspective of nature, animal neurology, and all of that? When did this become the idea for you? Because again, it's not the normal trope that I see a lot of times, or I would assume many see all the time when you look at an epic fantasy world.
yeah, I mean, I have read a lot of mythology, fantasy, and I love it. I love all epic fantasy. um, but I guess it's just like I had been thinking that I wanted to ruin the story of Cinderella. So I just read like the grim version of Cinderella, and like I thought maybe I would like that better than like the Disney version, and I didn't. I hated it. I thought it sucked. And so I was like, I just want to write this, but make it awful and amazing at the same time. And so that was like the initial seed of an idea, and there were no tree people. But as I was doing my test drafts and trying to like figure out who Axley was, and try to figure out like what the dynamics were going to be between some of the main characters. And my test drafts, I just throw away. I just write and I throw away until I get to a point where I'm enjoying the characters enough that I cannot throw it away. Um, and as I was brainstorming for that, I had decided that I wanted to go with like this overarching star magic thing due to the scene that initially popped into my head, which was like the ballroom scene. So I was already at that point kind of like simultaneously writing the test drafts and thinking of the history of the world and how this was going to be a ballroom that was once an observatory for a previous like civilization that lived here, and have that kind of influence how each of them thought about these star like meteors that fell to the world and caused these sort of magic. It's not really magic, it's all like natural here, but it's actually really sci-fi that's dressed up like fantasy, and you would never know it was sci-fi reading it. But so I knew I wanted to do the star magic thing, and then I was in the car listening to the radio, and I heard the song Roots by In This Moment. It was the first time I'd heard that song, and it had the perfect like vibe of the character that I had been developing.
Mm.
And like, of course, because I am so scatterbrained, like her yelling like Roots in this song made me think of a Frida Kahlo painting called Roots, which I was just talking about the other day on like Twitter, and I think I talked about it on TikTok as well. Um, that this painting, like Frida Kahlo, obviously an amazing artist, and there's so much to like her life and her art and her disabilities, and just but more so than her disabilities, like what she wanted out of life versus what she got. And like as far as like having kids and things like that. And so that got me thinking, about the Roots painting and the symbology there. And I decided that I wanted the Spriggans. And like I had been told stories about Spriggans, that was one of the main things that my dad used to scare me with in the woods was Spriggans.
Mm.
And like I hadn't ever written them into a fantasy story before because I didn't feel like I could do them justice. But there's like a video game, I think it's one of the Elder Scrolls games, that has like Spriggans in them that like had them different than like how I was told about them as a kid. They
Hmm.
took so many liberties in that video game. I can't remember which one it is, but so like my dad told it kind of more in line with the lore, they steal children, um, and things like that. And I had like all these ideas about Spriggans in my head, and this Roots painting and this Roots song for like the personality and like the backstory, and my backstory, my childhood with like these scary stories of these evil creatures in the woods, and stealing children and living underground, and there's so much Fey lore, and like the Spriggans are kind of like a side thing in that. And I thought I can take that lore and make it crazy, you know. I can do something completely different with it. So then I started doing like the brain overlays to do like the magic system of how I was going to do each character's personality. So people who had this one character sprigging characteristic where they could kind of sense where the stars are, which you probably not even going to notice that in the first book, but you might if you really pay attention. Um, but in the second book, it does get touched on a little bit. So birds have that migration center in the brain. And so I lined those up and I saw which part of the brain that was for a bird and which personality traits are like connected to that, and which like skills and attributes in humans are connected to that. And so I actually have a personality test. I think it's still up on Quizmaker, where you can see like your human traits, how that would translate as a place in the brain to like where these animal or plant characteristics would be for the Spriggans. And
Mm.
so I looked at birds and wolves and I think foxes and bears, to get an idea of like where these areas of the brain would have crossover. So, like some of these hybrids, the book is about hybrids. I don't think I mentioned that. So there's the Spriggans and there's the humans, and then they make hybrids so that they can communicate and trade. So like the Spriggans' weapons trade is kind of like the what the world hinges on. And the hybrids, get a mix of human and Spriggan DNA. So obviously, it's kind of like a genetic lottery. Not every hybrid turns out the same. Some of them end up like more emotional, like humans, and then some of them end up, I guess, like with more hunting instincts, like animals, and just various things with these gifts. Some of them end up with like the soft tissue cartilage for the soft step gift. Um, that one was a bit of a stretch as far as like nature goes, but I found some justifications for it, my research. But so I started doing the brain overlays, and I don't remember what the question was, but it was a lot of fun. I built a big world on trees.
Mm.
And I don't really know why I did that. I just, I was
Yeah.
thinking about it and it happened. Uh, just one thing leads to another, I guess.
Yeah, you connected nature with epic fantasy. According to what I'm hearing, you did it pretty well. Yeah, and by the way, you before we started today, you were talking about you don't know how to talk about your book and everything. Are, were you just kidding? Because I'm not gonna lie, you got me so excited to pick this book up. I'm over here thinking I might have to pick it up right after we get done here.
People always want like a blurb or a synopsis, and like they want to know about the plot.
Mm,
And like all I can think to say is like it's about a tree prostitute too, but there's no spice in there. It's she's just killing people. She's also an assassin, and like she's like trying to help her brother. She doesn't want him to like destroy the world because he's got this glass magic gift thing. And when it gets to
mm,
plot, like I outlined the heck out of this book after I was done
mm,
with my test drafts, and
yeah.
but it's a character outline. It's not like she's fighting some big evil. And I think like for other genres, it's so much easier to like describe like the plot of a book. But like when you're in epic fantasy, it gets harder because a lot of it is just so character driven, and like it's like battles and wars are happening, things are changing. Like she is escaping and then like coming back to like free somebody, and then like there's just so much going on, and it's a
Mm,
plot. It's just a character driven plot, and not like a no, there's some big bad guy that we've got to kill. So it makes it really hard to describe when people ask like just what's the book about as far as a plot.
yeah.
But as far as
Mm,
making the book, I love talking about making the book because that was just so much
okay.
fun.
Yeah. But I actually want to point back to something you talked about. You talked about how you were in the car, you were listening to the radio, and all of a sudden you heard her talking about roots. Immediately, your brain went from that to immediately thinking about how that can apply to your book and so on and so forth. I actually want to ask about that because, especially because you're writing epic fantasy, that requires a lot more compared to other genres. There obviously writing a book in general is difficult,
It's hard.
but yeah, with epic fantasy specifically, it can feel absolutely insane. What allowed you to truly be able to get into the zone of being able to write out this book? Were there things that you found yourself doing more often that allowed you to just again sort of get zoned out and be able to write? Or was it more of just a freelance thing where you just found an idea and bang, you just were throwing it into the book?
I just get obsessed, and then I just
Mm,
can't stop. There did get a point like when I was rewriting. So like the first draft is always just like a frenzy of, you're just so excited to be writing every day, all the time. First drafts are great. Um, but then you get to the point where you read that first draft and it's terrible, and you realize that you just have to throw it away and rewrite the whole thing. And that sucks. and you have to have the motivation to do that and to do the editing. And again, I edited for like 2 years, and I think it went through like 3 or 4 drafts. And it's a little bit harder to motivate yourself as time goes on with the editing. So I did have to kind of like learn some discipline because like this was the first book that I even liked enough to try to edit. Like all the previous books, I would just throw them away. I was just like, oh, like I don't like this anymore. I'm throwing it away, and I would never even try to edit them. And this book though, like I liked the premise of it. I loved the world that I built, and I even loved the characters. But when I read it, none of it was, like what I wanted it to be. And I think people don't realize that about editing, like outside of like authors who have had to do it. It's torture. But you think of editing as like you're correcting all your mistakes and you're making your sentences sound prettier. I don't think people realize what a humongous difference editing can make in a
Mm-hmm.
terrible book. Because, like, you can
Mm.
have the best idea, it's hard to describe, but, like, this scene is going to have zero impact if you don't write it the right way. And that's not just about grammar and spelling and sentence structure. Like it's about which words are next to each other and like, how long your sentences are. And like all the little things that go into it really end up mattering. It matters what you wrote 3 pages before. Like, did you build up enough tension before this? Because, like, in your mind, it has tension, of course, because you imagined it's like a movie. But in a book, you need to, like, establish all this other stuff. So, a lot of editing is just, it's everywhere. It's all over the
Mm.
book, and it's a lot. So, trying to motivate myself to do that. I do have a playlist. Again, I think it's been like 7 years now that I've been in this world that I've been listening to the same playlist. It doesn't sound like music anymore, but it is my editing playlist and like rewriting playlist where I just listen to this and my brain knows immediately, okay, it's writing time. Like we are sitting down and we are getting this done. Uh, and I guess I had a writing buddy for a while when I was doing Starlight Jewel. That was really fun and helpful. It was just hard to coordinate because I'm not a very scheduled person.
Mm.
But I think almost every day, like at like 5 a.m., we were up and writing together, and we had that little forest app where you like can do like sprints. So that was really helpful. If you're having trouble, just find yourself a writing buddy. Just make sure that they're not less disciplined than you. Be the less disciplined one in the room. So yeah, but
That
I,
makes sense.
you just got to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, I think I saw somewhere, I can't remember where, but I did see somewhere that your editing philosophy was somewhere around this idea of just pruning it with a chainsaw. And
Yeah.
I mean, based on what you just said, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot more that goes into it than what people realize. You're not just picking out little pieces and changing little things. There's a lot more that goes into it. And again, that's why I applaud all of you authors because it's something that I've learned quite a bit about talking with authors, but everyone always tells me it's a lot harder than people give credit for. But
Yeah.
real
No, I
quick,
wouldn't ever consider myself a good writer. I'm like a good editor. Like I edited my
mm,
book really good.
yeah,
And like
that's a good way
whenever
to put
people
it.
think that I'm saying a book is bad, it's mostly I think they should have edited for another year.
Mm, that's a good way to put it. Decent writer, good editor. That's a good way to put it. I like that. But you were talking about how you would write the first drafts, you didn't like it, and then you would throw them away. That seems like it was a big part of your life was writing all these stories, not really liking them too much, and then throwing them away. Looking back, do you think that doing that was something that helped you to almost feel safe when writing? Because I'm thinking about the experiences you talked about before and how writing always seemed to be associated with negativity. how, for example, with your teacher and with all these other people who wouldn't help you with your diagnosis, and then so you would write these stories and then you wouldn't like them, and so you would throw them away. Was that sort of a mechanism to make you feel safe so that you could keep writing, or was it just strictly something that you just didn't like the stories in general?
Um, there was definitely an aspect of like just being self-conscious. Like I do remember, I think it was probably like ninth grade. I showed like my friend, like my best friend at the time, a story that I had been writing. Like I just wanted her to read like the first couple pages, and she just like handed it back to me and said that it would like she couldn't read it. Like and like it's not like any fault of hers. She couldn't read it. Like my handwriting was so bad that she just couldn't. We're still friends. But that kind of like made like a pretty big mental roadblock as far as like showing anyone else my work, because like they weren't going to be able to read it. Like if you know your best friend isn't going to take the time to sit there and decipher your chicken scratch handwriting, then obviously no one else is going to either. And so I definitely became sort of like a closet writer, and it was something I was super embarrassed about because for one, I couldn't help it. Like, you know, it's kind of like a weird thing where like I talk about it so much now that I sometimes forget how self-conscious I was. But when you can't help doing something like you don't want, like I didn't want to be writing. I wanted to like go on like some big career path and be successful and prove that I was, you know, smart and stuff to the world and that I could do it. Um, and you know, I just wanted to forget that like writing existed, and I wanted to have friends and do the things that normal people do. I guess I had like all these expectations for my life to be normal, and I really wanted that. But then I was just writing, um, and so I was super embarrassed that I couldn't stop writing, and that it was so bad, and that I was writing all these just worthless stories. Were they worthless? They were unedited. um, you know, it's one of those things where like I don't believe that anything unedited is really going to be good. Like there might be like a few people who are just so talented who they can write like a story in the first draft is, you know, just gorgeous. But
Mhm.
for sure in my experience, I'm not one of those people, and nobody I've beta read for is one of those people. And like so it was embarrassing. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I just kind of like wrote when no one was watching and kept it secret. But then I got this it wasn't like secret. Like I think people still probably knew that I was like doing something, like, you know, they would see me like writing in passing, but then I got this job where, you know, like I'm a living caregiver, and so I live at work, and so there's always somebody around. Like I don't have like the kind of privacy that I think that I had before.
Mhm.
Um, or even like before I became a live-in caregiver at this job, I was still working for this family, and my boss would see me writing all the time, and like I found that I was like that person who just like closes a screen really quick as if I was like watching porn or something. And eventually he started asking about it, and like I was just like I did not want to share anything for a while, but then I had questions. You know, when you're writing, questions always come up, like how does this work or how does that work.
Mhm.
And my boss was in the military, so like perfect resource for somebody writing epic fantasy, like because I don't know how anything in the military works, and
Mhm.
my brother is not always available to me, and like he's also in the military. And so I was like, you know, asking him these military questions, and like he caught on what I was doing, that I was asking book questions, because why does anybody want to know this random stuff? um, and so finally I ended up just kind of like talking to him a bit about what I was doing, just because you have to explain like what would you do if you were like like a captain, a lieutenant, a general, like, or whatever in this situation. You know, what would the ranks even be called? Like, I remember asking him about ranks, like for like different military branches, because I really had no idea. And so he was just like this wealth of like knowledge for this side of fantasy that I had not been able to write accurately before in my crappy unedited stories. And so then talking to him for the questions ended up just talking to him about like, man, I really can't get past this part. I don't know how to make this work. And so he ended up being somebody that I would talk to about my books. He did not appreciate it all the time because I ended up talking a little bit too much sometimes about the problems. He just gets so frustrated when things aren't working. It's a very like it's fulfilling to write, but when you can't do the thing that you want to do, or at least in my
Hmm.
experience, when I can't do the thing I want to do, it's unbearable. Um, and so I did start complaining a little bit, and that's eventually what led him to tell me to find some writing people because he didn't know how to help me, um, which very fair. But he also is my like cover designer. So he has like a day job where he designs things for like a more professional people. So my book was like completely different than the design work that he usually does. He's not available for hire. He hates it. His eyes are going. But but he is willing to do my last book in this series before he forces me to go and find my own designer.
Yeah. Hey, that's pretty awesome though that he was able to help you with that. And it's funny, I noticed that a lot with authors is they always, especially ones that are truly passionate, they always tend to have those moments where they actually went to almost an IRL person or place or class or whatever to be able to find more information rather than just looking online. It's funny because I noticed that quite a bit, especially with again ones that I are very very passionate about what they do. But I want to talk a little bit real quick about how most people would get the feeling that I wouldn't want to show my book to someone, or I wouldn't want to show anything, my work, whatever, to someone because I would fear them hating it. You were on the complete opposite side from what I'm hearing today, where you didn't truly fear people hating it. It felt like you feared that they would love it. And it came down to this feeling of because you wouldn't personally believe them. There are a lot of people who are struggling with those kinds of maybe not the exact feelings, but they struggle with almost understanding that people will actually enjoy what it is that they can do, whether it is that they're an author, whether it is or whatever it is that they're doing, that there are people out there who will truly not just understand them, but truly appreciate what it is that they've done. Like you mentioned before with your book, how when you released it, you expected no one to like it, and now you're almost shocked because there's all these people who are talking about it and showing that they actually loved it and so on and so forth. So, with that in mind, do you still fight that tendency regularly of just having this feeling of there's no way that someone will appreciate what it is that I've done or what I've accomplished? And if you still struggle with that, do you have advice for people out there who might feel somewhat similarly to you?
Um, I don't like. I guess I did not expect people to like it, and I feel with some certainty that at least some people who review, especially in the indie space, um, review higher than they would. They review higher than they would, and they puff up their compliments a little bit more than I would like. And not because like I think that their intentions are bad. Obviously, they have very good intentions when they do that. But like I guess I grew up in a criticism house. I grew up in a house where like my grandmary told me that I was the worst actor on stage, and I'm sure that shocks absolutely no one. I was very stiff, um, and improv is not in my vocabulary. So like I just grew up very accustomed to hearing like, oh, you didn't do that very well, but you could improve doing this and this and this. And like my mother was always helping me to improve in various things. And I didn't really have anyone who was just kind of like fluffing me up, like just like, complimenting me for, things that I wasn't doing well. Um, and so I guess getting getting to the like international book community online, it's a very different culture. And I do think it's kind of like a cultural thing. Like where I'm from, like how I was raised is pretty normal. Uh, and, I've met other authors from like the rural Virginia kind of regions, and we all sort of have the same like mentality about like, criticism and talking about like the good and the bad of books and things like that. Um, so it is a bit hard to accept kind of like when people overwhelmingly love your book. I think coming from like my experience and my background of like how people talk, that's for one just unusual. Um, and and I try to put it in the perspective of there are other parts of the country where people are nicer. and and so if you just take the percentage of niceness you're used to and add some on, then this makes sense and you can interpret it in this way that you're more accustomed to. So, I kind of see all my 5 stars as 4 stars and all my 4 stars as 3 stars. And, I try to be realistic about it. But I've never been upset by criticism. I think, again, just because of how I was raised and like how I like, you know, like it wasn't like people were being mean when they were criticizing me growing up. It was always to help me improve things. And and getting criticism, especially in the beta reader phase, was so helpful. I mean, I wouldn't have published ever. I would have been way too embarrassed to publish if Mark had not helped me with all the things he helped me with.
Hmm.
Um, and so I just see criticism as just so valuable. Like there is just nothing as a writer that is more valuable than somebody telling you what's wrong with your book. And
Mm.
even if it's something that you disagree with that you're not going to change, things like that, because again it's subjective. Like there are plenty of people who have found issues with my book. There's one review that is kind of funny, that she was basically explaining to me in her review how you should write yearning in books and like romance, like I think she actually said the word edging. and and I was like, you know what, girl, that's great advice for somebody else. Like, and like she didn't like the book. Obviously, I think the quote I used from her review is like, "This was yes, violence, no spice," and I realized when reading this book that I don't actually like that, and and like, great, she realized it on my book. I'm happy about that. Like, uh, but yeah, it's just a matter of kind of trying to put yourself in your reviewer's shoes. Like, is this person actually being malicious? Does your book actually suck, or is this something that you did intentionally? Because like I intentionally don't have like a super spicy book where like there's a lot of romantic melodrama. Like that was intentional. So why would I be upset
Mm.
that she didn't like my book?
Mm.
Um, and my expectation of everyone hating it was all the things that I already saw that were wrong with it. So like again, I edited for a long time and then I published it. I published it knowing that things were wrong with it. Like objectively, there's problems. But you can't edit forever and you're gonna get better like as time goes on. So as I was editing, I was getting better. I was seeing more flaws that I would have never recognized before. And I could have kept editing for another 10 years. And I probably still would have been getting better in that time. And eventually I would have
Hmm.
ruined the book. Um, so it's just a matter of it's your debut. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn what actually matters to readers and the things that you thought were going to be deal breakers for everybody. Like you spelling Spriggans in a weird way. And actually, only one person on the entire internet has ever cared. So it's, I don't know. If you're struggling with like whether you're good or not, or people are going to hate it or love it, um, like it's all those things. Like you're good and you're bad. You're gonna get better. People are gonna love it. People are gonna hate it. If everybody hates it, then you just get better. Like you just keep getting better. And I had, I guess, the opportunity of not having any confidence, so that I could get better on like however many hundreds of books I wrote before Starlight Jewel, just throwing them away. And I know
Hmm.
it's like a popular thing now to just decide you want to write a book and then you write that book and you want to publish that first one. That's like something I would have never even dreamed of doing. So I feel kind of lucky that didn't have that kind of confidence.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess you just gotta accept that your book is gonna be what it is. Do your best, edit it, uh, try to get better. Don't get stuck in style. That's I guess like my least favorite thing to hear as a beta reader is like a debut author saying this is my style. And like
Hmm.
all the other editors in my circle agree with that because that is like the biggest excuse for people to continue making mistakes, and it makes it clear that you don't actually understand why we're making that correction.
Hmm.
Um, when you're on your debut novel, you don't have style. You are styleless. You are like your style is something that you develop as you write like more and more books. And even all the books that I wrote and I threw away and I didn't edit, I would not consider any of those to have any kind of style. Like they might have had some personality, but they didn't have style. And so you just got to develop that as you go. If you've got an editor or like a good beta reader who's making suggestions, if you don't understand it, ask why. Don't just say, "Oh, that's my style. I don't need to use commas," because that'll just make everyone not want to edit for you.
Hmm. And I just want to say real quick that applies to everything. Everything in life is pretty much exactly as you said. You're going to suck at something, you're going to get better. Someone's going to be better than you. Someone's going to say you're still not the best, and you just got to keep going to improve on it. Overall, that's great advice. And again, this is coming from someone, by the way, who's Lyons here, who has been through so much and has still been able to successfully publish a book, considering you had these circumstances. We won't even call them some circumstances. You had these circumstances that should have stopped you from being able to ever publish a book, but you still were capable of doing it. Real quick here, just as a last question, I want to ask you. Here at Authors by Us, our whole ideology, we talked about it a little bit before the episode, is you guys deserve all the praise. You really do. You've done something that 99% of people in this world will never do, and that's write a book. It's ironic, but it's funny how many people may have the goal to do it, but they never accomplish it. And you guys definitely deserve all the praise for that. But because of that praise, many people only have that to connect to you. They see you as the author. They see you as the pages, the book. They don't look beyond because they never really get the opportunity to learn about the person beyond. So, with that in mind, is there something that you would want the audience to know about you that they either won't learn if they were to read your book, or maybe even they haven't learned yet because on this podcast? Is there something you would want them to know more about you?
The cats do help me. frequently. I don't know if that's like about me, but I love cats. I grew up with cats. But I have a very different cat dynamic now that I'm an adult because we have indoor cats. You've probably
Mm,
seen some videos of me and Jake. He is the only like indoor outdoor cat, mostly because he's incredibly well behaved and he just views the world as his salad. He loves to eat grass and go dig holes with me in the woods. Um, so, but they're very inspirational for books. Like when you're writing like assassin rogue type characters, like characters that are agile and are going to be like leaping like and doing things and kind of being elegant physically, very inspirational. And also a lot of the like magic in like my current series, Gifts of the Aldtree, is sensory, like the keen ears and keen scent. So I did use them for inspiration, and they were subject to several experiments on sound and smell. Scout mostly. He's a professional. He was paid in treats. Um, but he got a big smell test. I can send you a picture. Put jars of different spices and stuff out to see what offended him the worst and which smells that he actually liked. And then I did sound experiments with all of them to see like what sounds would make them run into another room, make their eyes wide, versus which sounds they actually liked.
mm.
If like loud noises adjusting like at different volumes had any impact on them. So when you're reading about the sensory experiences in my books with the characters, just know that there were lots of cat experiments involved in that, and the reactions that my characters have is just my cats. Uh, but they did enjoy the experiments. They like to be involved. Cats always just want to be involved in whatever you're doing,
Mm.
and yeah, they were very good sports about it.
Awesome. That was awesome. I want to thank you so much for coming on, Lyons. This was an awesome conversation. Your story is very intriguing and very empowering. I think many people will come away with the understanding that there's nothing that should really limit you when it comes to doing something that you either want to do or you feel the need to do, because you are the perfect example of that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how you give us more stories in the future to really think about. And for myself personally, I know I'm very excited to get a hold of your stories as well, just to because you got me intrigued. So I know you got plenty of other people intrigued as well. But again, I want to thank you for coming on, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how 2026 goes for you.
Yeah, I probably won't publish anything in 2026 because I take a long time to edit. But
Hmm.
thank you for having
Yeah,
me on.
yeah, 2027. It doesn't matter. You're still gonna be putting out great stories. But again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Authors by Us closing thoughts section, where we go over some of the best things that we found and learned during the episode. For me, this episode was extremely empowering, and I think that's the first thing that I want to talk about here. So, the first thing, let's just get straight into it. Number one, we have to bring out the elephant in the room here, and that is Lyon's disorder and how she was able to rise above it. You see, one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about her story is the fact that everything in regards to writing had a negative connotation behind it. Think about it. Think about it like this, right? She had to go through unbelievable amounts of mental torture because every time she would write, her words weren't as good as the other kids that were in her classes. So she already would have gotten lower self esteem and lower self worth just based on that alone. Then you had the fact that every time she tried to write, she would feel pain. On top of that, she also had teachers who kind of knew that something might have been wrong with her, but did nothing about it. You had another teacher who literally laughed at her because of her writing. And then you had the fact that the entire time that she had to write without using a tool like a laptop or something, she had to just go through the agony of not being able to always understand her own work. She had friends who couldn't understand her. And there, basically, the point is every single time that you bring up writing in Lyons' life, for the most part in the past, there was always negativity. It was always associated with negativity. And yet, all of that, through all of that, she has 2 books written and she's currently working on a third. If that doesn't scream empowerment, I don't know what does. I really don't. Because that, to me, and it really goes to show why I made this podcast. And it's one of the big reasons why I love what I do. Because the fact is, to me, that is so inspiring, that is so empowering, and it goes to show that as long as you are willing to put in the effort, you will be rewarded, no doubt. Because for her to go through all that negativity in regards to writing and still come out the other side a successful author, nothing explains that except sheer amounts of effort and the want and need to put her stories out there for others to see. To me, incredible story of empowerment, definitely one that we all can learn from. The second thing I want to talk about here, though, is the sheer amount of work that I've been noticing that these authors put into their work. So I've talked with quite a few authors at this point, and a lot of them tend to really utilize this idea of either putting their own life into their work in some way, shape, or form, or they put so much work into understanding their world, their characters, their everything when it comes to these books. And for Lyons, it's no different. For example, right after we got done with the pod, she literally told me that the reason why her hair is so long is because that has something to do with the book that she's currently writing. Or in the pod, if you don't remember, it was one of the last things she talked about was the fact that her cats, now obviously she didn't literally experiment on her cats, but the fact that she literally, quote unquote, put her cats through an experiment so that she could understand everything about their senses and then go on to utilize that in her books. That is incredible. To me, it goes to show just how far these authors are willing to go. To me, it shows the real essence of an author. Because to me, one thing a lot of people tend to forget is you can tell when an author has put a lot of work in. Maybe if you're a beginner reader, you may not fully see it. But I know for myself, when I read a book, I can tell if an author really went deep and really tried to understand something and really wanted to implement everything that they could find to the best of their ability within their books. And the fact that she went through all this work to pretty much bring the best of the best in terms of the details and all of these different things into her books. To me, that is incredible. That is literally incredible. And I've been noticing that with quite a few authors. And I think it's so cool because it goes to show, again, on the effort side of things, just how much effort these people are willing to put into their books. So that's number 2. The last thing I want to talk about, though, is her instinctive need to write. Because again, no one would have blamed Lyons for not writing and not becoming an author. Her disorder that she has is one of those, it's an extremely ironic disorder where You've got someone who really feels this need, desire, and want to write, almost like it's an animal instinct, but she had a disorder that made it almost impossible to do so. And it's so ironic to me, but I want to touch on that instinctive side of things because people tend to believe that they are just born with that. And maybe with Lyons, you could argue that her childhood and the fact that she grew up with her dad reading her stories before she came out of the womb, and the fact that she talks about how stories were just a natural part of her life. So, yeah, you could argue that she was more of a natural born writer. But does that mean that you can't become better in whatever it is that you are doing unless you are a natural born person in that field? From my opinion, and I was able to talk with Lyons a little bit more about this as well, I don't think so. And what I mean by that is many people believe that to be the case. They think that if they aren't just a natural talent or a natural born person who can do XYZ, that they can't pursue that. While it is true that there are people who are born with that natural tendency to want to do something and pursue it, it doesn't mean that you can't either. For example, for myself, podcasting is only something that I really started to understand and learn about over the past 2 to 3 years, right? And yet I fell in love with podcasts. And now I'm at the point where not only do I want to improve this podcast, but I want to get to the point where we are the biggest podcast in the world when it comes to books and when it comes to authors and when it comes to discussing those kinds of stories and all these things. I want to be the best. So every single day, I have this need now to want to go down the rabbit hole and learn as much as I can about podcasting, right? But even on the side of a particular skill, I'll talk about conversation for a second. I brought this up, I believe, on a previous episode. If not, I know I had a discussion with an author about it. But when it comes to conversation, it may surprise you, but I was not always the biggest conversationalist. I wasn't. For example, I remember in the past, I wouldn't say I was overly shy, but I could only really hold conversations with people that I was really good friends with. That pretty much meant that I had to not only know you, but I had to be a really, really good friend of yours, or obviously a sibling or a parent or whatever. I had to be very, very close to you if I was going to have a meaningful conversation. It wasn't until I reached it wasn't until I reached closer to adulthood where I started to realize that I kind of have a decent skill when it comes to conversation. But the issue was even though I found out that I had gotten pretty decent with conversation, I still wasn't the best because I still couldn't talk to strangers effectively without feeling like there was a frog in my throat that I wanted to just that I didn't want to say anything to them. And this only got worse with the pandemic because when the pandemic rolled around, I got to the point where I almost became a full-on introvert. Didn't really want to talk to anyone at all. What helped me though was after the pandemic and when I had this realization that conversation and speaking was something that I actually had a decent skill with and maybe I want to get back to improving on that. I remember getting to the point where every single week, whenever I went somewhere, I would make it a goal. And I started out doing it once a week, and eventually it became every time I would go somewhere. I tried to make it a goal to have, even if it was only 2 minutes, have a short conversation with someone. That was the goal. And after months and months and months of doing that, now I've gotten to the point where I can speak with almost anyone. Literally, put me in front of almost anyone, and I think I can hold a pretty good conversation with them. But again, This wasn't a natural born thing that I just was blessed with, you could say. This was a skill that I obtained over time and I got decent with it, but I never really applied it. And it wasn't until after the pandemic and I started really working on improving that with this skill that eventually I got to the point where my speaking ability got better and my conversation skills became a lot better. And even today, I'm still working on it. So, the point I want to bring out here is if you want to get to the point where you want to have this almost animal like instinct to want to improve on something and want to do something, there are two kinds of people. You have people like Lyons who are unironically, we'll say, born with it, where they just naturally want to be telling stories. They naturally want to be doing something and pursuing it over time. But then you also have people who have to obtain those skills and obtain those pursuits later on. And that's completely fine. All you need is the willingness to go down the rabbit hole. And when you do that, that's the best thing to help you to gain that desire to want to do something and pursue it further. So, those were just a few things from this episode that I wanted to point out. Absolutely loved this episode. I know for her, she talks quite a bit and I loved it. I think this episode was amazing. Her story was great and it inspired me and empowered me to want to continue building this podcast out for you guys because just like me loving these stories and wanting to explore these authors and truly understand them as people, you guys deserve the best. And with that, that's all I got for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.